right. Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Daniel, for joining once again.
Of course, thank you.
So before we talk about Ivy, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So quick background, very similar to other interviews I've done, so it's slightly kind of scripted. But basically did mechanical engineering originally. I didn't like it as much as I thought I did at high school, so I'm not as into planes and engines as I perhaps thought I would be. Ended up going into a computer science PhD in robotics and 3D vision specifically. That's actually where Ivy originated. Basically, the problem that we were trying to solve there is we had a lab where lots of people were using lots of different frameworks and basically wanted to solve that fragmentation problem. The problem seemed to be very much mirrored in the whole of ML, where there's lots of frameworks and people that can't share code easily. So ended up diving deep down that engineering rabbit hole at the expense of the research, it has to be said. So this has turned into a little bit of a kind of a personal background, Ivy origin story. But yeah, that's kind of the background. So engineering by trade, went into computer science PhD, and now deep in the weeds of trying to unify all the machine learning frameworks, basically.
Love it, love it. And I love how it came from a personal need that effectively you're building for yourself. And so today, for your own needs and for the first, users that you have, like, why do you think people choose to use Ivy? What's the biggest benefit they get?
So I think there's actually a few different users that have slightly different profiles. The clearest story at the moment is, well, let's say two. One of them is researchers or R&D teams that are frustrated with the fragmentation in the space. They want to be able to plug and play with any code that's out there, and they can't. Let's say that you are doing your work in PyTorch and you have your PyTorch data loading pipeline and all of your models and all of this stuff built up, and then DeepMind release some awesome stuff in JAX. You can't just try that. You need to wait for a re-implementation to appear several weeks and months later. The devil is very much in the detail. So there's going to be subtle differences to this, and then you can't guarantee that it's the same. So it's just very tedious to try to recreate that model in a new framework. So with Ivy, you can basically take any model in any framework in any version, add one function decorator, and you can bring it into your project, and it's guaranteed to work. Same with libraries. So people that want to tinker with things and kind of iterate their R&D at the speed of thought, Ivy unlocks that for them. And another group, I suppose, would also be framework and library creators who want to create libraries, and they end up being locked into one particular framework. And then when things evolve in the space, their library becomes at risk of becoming redundant when a new framework comes out and takes over, and so on. So if people want to really future-proof their code so that anybody can use it going forward, then Ivy is a good framework to write the code in. So these are the two. There's others as well. I won't complicate it too much, but these are two profiles where Ivy very strongly resonates, I would say.
Perfect. And for the researchers as a group, I understand that it makes not only their daily job easier, but also can aid with the reproducibility of research and collaboration worldwide, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And obviously, in general, there is the case that if you've got standardized data sets, you don't always need to recreate the results of another paper. Sometimes it's enough just to get the numerical results, which is a fair point. But often you need to test out various models on your own data that you've then tested on as a benchmark and so on. And if things are in different frameworks, it can be very hard to align the whole kind of loading and training pipelines and things. So there's often a case to do the reproduce. There's often a big need to transpile for reproducibility. Absolutely.
Got it. And of course, going to the industry applications, it's next door. So how do you envision that happening? And are there already any, conversations or uses?
Yeah. So there are a few different, again, some slightly different profiles. I'll avoid for now saying that the companies we're talking to and exactly what problems they have, but just to give some idea of profile. Basically, one company is very similar to this research aim where it's R&D acceleration. If you want to be able to quickly try things out, R&D teams have this exact need, the same way that researchers do, basically, to get like good ideas to product quickly. You want to try everything that's out there. But another profile would be, let's say, kind of B2B developer-facing SaaS companies who themselves don't have a horse in the race with regards to which framework wins. They don't care whether PyTorch wins the race, JAX wins the race, TensorFlow, etc., or even scikit-learn and SciPy and some of the more classical frameworks, which is still in extensive usage in other areas in numerical computation in other sectors. And basically, if you are providing distributed training platform or high parameter tuning or model serving, etc., you don't care which framework. You just want your service to work for every machine learning practitioner in the world. And if Ivy is the docking station that you can plug into as an enterprise, then that's very valuable to them to unlock all potential customers instantly. So this is one user profile that's quite enterprise specific. Another one is actually companies that have internal fragmentation. TensorFlow was by far the front runner 5 or 6 years ago. Of course, now PyTorch is the front runner, arguably, or I think quite convincingly, certainly in research. But there's a lot of companies that have put a lot of resources into extensive C++ customized code. It has TF Lite, which is very good for mobile and edge devices. And they have a setup pipeline for running in production TensorFlow code. And now their research is happening in JAX and predominantly PyTorch. And then there's this internal need to constantly bridge that gap and convert their research code in production code. So a lot of industries have internal fragmentation that Ivy can also solve. And that's obviously a huge money saver, huge accelerator of production. Yeah.
Absolutely. This is very well thought out from every aspect. And I mean, you seem like the right guy to be doing this. So, congratulations.
Well, hopefully. Thank you. Fingers crossed.
So Ivy is open source. How did you come to the decision to open source the project?
So to be honest, Ivy originally was not a company. It was an open source project by design, and it kind of needed to be that way. So there's a few reasons. First of all, Ivy is a framework, first and foremost, and of course frameworks need to be open source because the idea is you can build new models, new libraries, etc. in Ivy. So it is a necessity, really. The other point then, a more interesting and important question was whether or not the front-end APIs, and it's getting a bit technical here, I suppose, but basically, Ivy does two things. Ivy is a fully fledged machine learning framework that can act as a drop-in replacement for PyTorch or TensorFlow, etc. This needs to be open source so that people can create new things with Ivy. The front-end APIs sit on top of Ivy's functional API, and they effectively mimic the functional APIs of all of the existing frameworks, but they do so by building on top of Ivy's functional API. This is essential to enable automatic code conversions between frameworks. This is something that could have been done closed source, and we could have implemented all of these functions internally and exposed this just through a proprietary transpilation API or something, but decided not to, and it wasn't even really a decision, it was quite obvious to us, mainly because this is, well, first of all, we're trying to create a standard here. So it really just needs to be Apache 2 open for everybody to use. It's just, I wouldn't want to use something that isn't like that if it's really trying to standardize the field, first and foremost. Secondly, if people come along and they try to transpile something and there's 2 or 3 functions missing, it's really important to us and to them, I think, that they can then go and make a pull request and get their bug fixed in a few hours, and then it will work. So the ability, kind of empowering people to be able to fix their own bugs and not just like file a bug request is really important. And these front-end APIs are really, kind of what often will happen is you try to transpile something, it says 98% of the functions were there and worked. There's just these 2 that aren't quite working. If you kind of go and make these changes, then your code will transpile correctly. So I think this really is necessary. And again, sorry, a bit of a monologue, but again, I think this is also reflected in the fact that we now have like 620 contributors. It's not just kind of a gimmick or something that all of these people have contributed or something. Like, we have managed to very strongly parallelize this huge engineering project, and the fact that it's so modular and each function is completely independent from the others means we can have 100 people on any given day working on Ivy in a meaningful way without treading on each other's toes. And I think open source, therefore, is a very strong, it is the best design to enable that kind of parallelism.
Yeah, and that already explains why people today choose to contribute to Ivy. Makes sense. How did you navigate choosing a license for facilitating this?
Sure. So to be honest, again, because everything out there, all machine learning frameworks are Apache 2, this was, again, not really a thing to navigate. We want people to be able to use Ivy as much as they want. Now, another question is when we start to build out SaaS offering and some more proprietary stuff, this is a different question, but actually there are going to be some elements of Ivy's high level tooling that is not open source anyway. So this doesn't have deep licensing concerns.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, as far as Ivy's framework with the front ends, the back ends, and everything, we want to make that fully open for people to do with whatever they want with it. And in a way, we just want people to benefit from Ivy first and foremost. And Apache 2 is just what made sense, really.
And at the moment, are you thinking forward in terms of monetization and some such offerings? Yeah.
Yes. To be honest, it's coming further down the line. Thankfully, we have investors that very much understand as well that first and foremost, you need to solve a real problem. And basically, Ivy is in a very strong position now to capitalize here and to solve a very meaningful problem that a lot of people have. And if we can get people using Ivy, I mean, the first thing to say here is that we are committed to Ivy remaining free to use in a fully unrestricted way for all students, researchers, and academics. And so this is kind of not where we're going to try to derive any revenue further down the line. We have got some ideas, but to be honest, I think for the time being, all that's on our roadmap and on our thoughts is to get Ivy out there, to get it in the form of an alpha release, which we're planning for early next year, get it in the form of a beta release, have complete unrestricted access to translations and compilations, see what the enterprises, startups, students, and open source community do with this, and then we can start to think about where we have the most value produced, where we might have the best possibility for successful value capture. But anyway, we need to get people using this on a large scale and solving real problems before we can like think too deeply about these next phases.
You can't skip steps. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so
exactly,
you are also hiring at Ivy, right? So would you like to tell us
yes.
how you're going about doing that?
Yeah, sure. So we are hiring. We're hiring a mix of machine learning interns, machine learning full-time, so kind of machine learning engineers, both full-time and intern roles, and also now, as announced yesterday, I think at the time of recording, a full stack senior engineer as well. And basically, the way we're going about that in terms of the way we've gone about hiring in general is we've reached out to a ton of universities, got emails sent around and so on. And we've had, very happy to say, we've had over 12,000 applicants so far. So a huge volume of people have applied all over the world. We currently have a team that's split across, I think, 18 different countries. So we're going for a fully remote, fully asynchronous global team. And so far it's working really well. So I would encourage anybody that's listening to apply. We'd love to get applications from all over the place. And again, the focus now is we've got quite a large team, so roughly 30 or so on the team at the moment. And basically, it's a huge, ambitious engineering challenge we're taking on. So all hands on deck, trying to get all of the front ends, back ends, everything implemented. So yeah, definitely a very, very diverse, multidisciplinary team.
That is phenomenal. That is phenomenal. And are applicants also contributors at first? Is it part of the interview process?
Yes, exactly. It is. So basically, what happens is everybody that applies is, as part of the application process, given the option to contribute to the code as part of that process. So people are paid. So everyone's paid $25 for what can take roughly an hour or so. Basically, we have a very clear workflow with videos. It's the exact same content as public, actually, for contributors. So there's no difference between the general contributors getting started and somebody that's applying. And they are requested to make a pull request, adding a front-end function or formatting a function correctly and so on, with some pretty self-contained, repeatable sub tasks basically. And then we have our team go through, walk people through responding to the PR, get it merged. And this is something that we think it's not assessed, actually, interestingly, because we can't do an assessment on something that is different every time. Every person implements a different function because it's actually contributing to the code. So it's more kind of just a way to make sure people can have a GitHub account, can make a pull request. It's kind of an entry level just to make sure they're able to get familiar with the code. And then once people have done that assessment, then it's kind of a level playing field with the later assessment stages, basically.
Absolutely. And both sides get to see what it's like to work together. And so that would be an edge also for open source projects today, I think, which leads me to the question, what has been your biggest surprise in open source in terms of how the company is functioning, like developments in the space? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's something I've not thought about so much. I think one thing is that I never imagined, I mean, so just for context, in January and even in February this year, so like 10, 11 months ago, there was one contributor, which was me, and there was like 80 GitHub stars or something. And basically the fact that I didn't expect that it would parallelize quite as well as it has. The fact that we've now got 620 contributors, each of those have had somebody that's carefully reviewed the pull request, made sure it's correct and got it merged. Obviously, that's partly because we've grown the team. Then everybody on the team has pull request reviewing responsibilities, so it parallelizes in that sense as well. And we've had so much engagement. We've got kind of 8,000 stars now, and everybody just getting around this project and contributing to it. So I didn't expect that it would parallelize quite as nicely as it has done. It seems like you can just kind of get more people engaged and everybody finds something useful to do. So that's nice.
I love it. And what do you think has been sort of like the thing you guys did right to facilitate that? I've heard from other maintainers, for example, that, you know, usually the bottleneck is reviewer time, not contributor time. Yeah. And some people are struggling to expand their contributor base. So how did you navigate it? Does it come down to documentation, to doing it over and over again?
I think there's a few things. I think one of them, to be honest, is not that we have any special insights. It's that Ivy is just incredibly modular. It's a unique project in that every single framework we support has a whole load of independent backend functions that need to be added and independent front-end functions that need to be added for all versions and so on. And none of these have much codependency. So it's just, there are literally thousands of tasks that can be worked on in complete isolation, which is very unique. So we kind of have that to our advantage. But on top of that, I would say what has been important as well is making a very thorough, clear documentation. I put a lot of effort into making videos. So every single page in our docs has a corresponding walkthrough video where me or somebody on the team goes through everything in detail. Our deep dive section of the docs, especially, we've made sure anytime we realize something new about the code, we always make sure to add it very concretely in the documentation. So I think this has helped. And also the fact that every single person on the team is expected to review pull requests. We have a lot of automations. We have something like 25 different automations and cron jobs to do all kinds of things. One of which is that PR reviewers are automatically assigned. So people don't have to, there's no manual kind of allocations here. So everybody just knows every week they have 2 or 3 PRs to review, and that's it. So yeah, so far so good.
So far so excellent. I mean, sounds like you're enjoying a lot of superpowers here. What about any challenges you're experiencing?
So I think probably probably every founder sets the target higher, kind of sets themselves a milestone that's a bit ambitious. So it's definitely taking a bit longer to get things rolled out. I was quite convinced we'd have the first full release of this in September, then definitely convinced it's November, and now it's January. And I do genuinely think this is definitely the case, but there's just a lot. This is less about the open source, to be honest. This is more just about the engineering challenge of getting all frameworks unified across all data types. We have incredibly thorough testing using hypothesis, and the number of corner case failure examples that we find is surprising. So it's an even bigger engineering challenge than I thought, but that hasn't deterred us. And yeah, so I'm still quite confident about our prospects of building something pretty awesome. So.
Absolutely. And I mean, you know, in 6 months' time, or who knows, we'd love to follow up and see where things are going after this next milestone is hit with the new release. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask, what do you think has changed over the last years in open source? And does Ivy represent a new type of company, a new type of project? If you could,
yeah,
put your finger in.
I don't know. That's a great question. Definitely, as far as venture goes and everything, I think, well, this is less about open source and more about the economic climate and everything, but I think it's harder to raise just on open source hype because it's not always clear that open source love and adoption correlates to a successful business. So this is something that I think has become more apparent over the last few years. But this is more about kind of the venture side. As far as open source itself, I don't have anything too intelligent to say here, other than to say that I think, from my perspective, machine learning is proliferating in all kind of areas of the world, more so than it perhaps was 10 years ago or 5-10 years ago. So when we look at the people contributing to Ivy, it's really incredibly global. And I don't know yet to what extent that's changed, but all I can say is that's amazing to see that really there's not a country in the world, I don't think, where somebody hasn't engaged with Ivy or contributed in some way. So I think ML and technical skills in the field are just becoming more universal, which is really nice.
Absolutely. Are there any people in open source that you follow, take their advice to heart? Any resources that you think people should be aware of?
Yeah, again, not so much. To be honest, I wasn't. Again, I'm quite new to the whole like deep open source space. I mean, again, up until 10 months ago, my biggest project was. I mean, there was Ivy. It had like kind of 70 stars, and one or two was contributing. I don't really know that much about. I'm quite new to kind of the open source space in a way, but I would say. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess again, so no resources or projects that I've deeply followed. One thing that I have done actually, so definitely one thing I took inspiration from was the creation of a Discord account and a following, or it could be a Slack account or whatever. But I think having a chat environment that's less formal, that doesn't need to have just a forum where you have issues and pull requests and stuff, but actually somewhere where you can just have a dynamic back and forth conversation is incredibly valuable. So we have a Discord account and you can click on this from the README and everything, very accessible. I think building a community really helps because then you can share memes, but you can also like answer questions and you can kind of feel a bigger sense of community than you otherwise would do with a slightly more distant, issue dashboard or something like this. So, and that's something that I've copied from, actually from the lab, a colleague of mine, Stephen, who worked on some open source projects, PyRep and RL Bench, some reinforcement learning projects, and he used a Discord account. So I definitely took some inspiration from the successes that he had as well. But no kind of proper, no tutorials or content or anything really that comes to mind on top of that.
Are most of the contributors today also active users, people from academia and research? There's a lot of people, so it might be hard to track this down, but what's the feel you get?
Yeah, so I think so a relatively large percentage are applicants, maybe around 50% who've just effectively done this as part of the application. Other than that, it's people that are toying with Ivy and want to use it in their research predominantly. And to be honest, I think the main point to make here is that they're not users per se. We're actually at a phase right now, and this is due to change in a few weeks, but we're at a phase where Ivy there is an old version 1.1.9, which was released kind of 11 months ago. But in terms of all of these code conversion abilities and translations and so on, Ivy is effectively pre-product and pre-release. So people are more swarming around the idea and what it could be, and then trying to help us get there more than they are users yet. But based on the enthusiasm we see from the contributors, I have high expectations that they would become heavy users of Ivy when we get the first release out.
Absolutely. Oh man, I'm so excited for this.
So right.
Have you at all thought about maybe how people could be advancing, sort of like as contributors, becoming a little more and more active, and how you might be able to incentivize that?
Yes, we actually have an ongoing project right now where we would like to add badges and rewards for certain feats that people have done and ranks and things like this, just to give some attention. Yeah, to give some well-deserved spotlights to people that are out there doing the really hard work. I mean, of course, there's the general GitHub kind of ordered list based on number of commits and things, but I don't think, well, it's quite useful, but that doesn't always reflect how good people's and how important people's contributions are. Sometimes in the team, someone spends 3 days solving a really hard bug that results in 3 lines of code changed. Other people who reformat the code obviously get like thousands of lines of code changed. So having some automations to actually detect who's working on what areas of the code and so on, and how important that is, would be really nice. So we want to get that rolled out soon, but still in the design phase of what that looks like exactly.
Absolutely. And I've heard from other projects that a lot of core developers, have a lot of job offers, land on their laps just by virtue of contributing to this project and having their work visible. And that might be a big motivation for why people do it. If you had to speak about the motivation of people, why do they contribute?
I think so, yeah, for sure. This is even just speaking personally, I was always quite proud to contribute to like TensorFlow repository or MXNet, or if you ever get a big project and you find a bug or you fix something, then it's nice to kind of show that on your CV or well, not on your CV maybe, but kind of showing it on your GitHub profile and so on. So this is the feeling I get for sure. And I also think that's why people are really interested and passionate. Everybody on the team that's joined, either as an engineer or full-time, people yeah, are very much behind and feel a deep sense of ownership of the project. And I think part of that is because all of the contributions are public for everyone to see. So when people are working on the really hard stuff, it's you don't need to kind of explain it to whoever you're trying to impress on, and maybe in a future job or something. It's really just there in the open. So I think people really like that. Yeah.
Someone that is just starting as a founder, as a maintainer, who just put their project out there, would there be any piece of advice or maybe something that you tried, didn't work, maybe you can save people some time, or maybe how do we attract the first contributors, right? It's all happened for you this year.
Yeah, so definitely what helped with the spark with us was that we did quite, we reached out to universities and so on, and we got people engaging with this as part of the application process. I think that has helped because in a way that a project obviously can be amazing and just doesn't have that initial push to get the ball rolling, and then it doesn't kind of gain that momentum. So if you can do some things that can help that, certainly in our mind partly was that, well, it serves a lot of things. Having people contribute to the code as part of the application tells them what the work's going to be like, and they can abandon the application if they want, which some people do, fair enough. It tells us, are they going to be able to do the actual work that they would then need to be doing? But also, it does get the ball rolling for the community visibility metrics, the contributors, the stars, because a lot of applicants then go on the website, they star it, etc. So if you can have some hacks that can kind of do all of this in one, then I would recommend that. It's definitely worked well for us to have that as part of the application, but also just getting the word out, messaging people on LinkedIn, doing a bit of the tedious, repetitive stuff, just telling people about it. And also, more importantly, less about kind of growth hacking or something, but just in general, I guess, building something, I would say, that doesn't try to compete too strongly with what's out there. I think actually my original mistake, more on a what is Ivy question, slightly more existential, was basically we originally wanted Ivy to be only a framework, where now I had this naive idea a little bit that when we say, hey, we've created Ivy, now you can build new models and new libraries in Ivy and it will support all frameworks, and kind of half of me thought that maybe everyone's going to start using Ivy now, which was of course not the case. And then kind of it made me think a bit more, well, actually there's all these amazing repositories out there, like in PyTorch, in TensorFlow, that have got huge communities and huge growth. Like we should try to solve a problem that they can use without starting from scratch and re-implementing everything in Ivy. And this is then where the motivation came for the transpiler, and this is now one of the main things we're focusing on. So I guess also try to solve a problem that's not kind of reinventing the wheel, not trying to build something that's not integratable to everything that's already out there. And if what you do is complementary, I guess it's got more likelihood to succeed, because there's a lot of people that already have very complex workflows and so on, and they don't want to kind of start again, even if what you're building could be better than what's out there eventually. These are some points I would say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And once you're effectively going to be becoming a platform, and so what can come out of that in the future, it's up for all of us. Yeah. And I'd like to remark again on your point earlier, if you are an open source project that did get a little bit of support, a little bit of funding, and you're hiring, actually having your applicants be contributors and going through that process can get the ball rolling a lot for your capacity as a team to learn and do this again and again. So I think it's a great way to kickstart it. I love it. And for people to contribute today, the best way is, of course, to head to your GitHub repository.
Of course.
Link things in here. I love it. Well, best of luck moving forward. I don't think, everyone can use some luck, but it seems like things are in place here, going strong.
Well, so far so good.
So far so good. So far so excellent, man. And it's the first year. Gotta point this out again, right? It is the first year of Ivy. This is
Yeah, it is. We still, I would say that I think we have some good metrics in terms of people following it and contributing and stuff, but we still do need to get people actually using it. So we've still got a long way to go. So some luck would still be helpful, but yeah, so far so good at least.
Any parting thoughts that you would maybe like to leave people with?
No, not other than I suppose this is very cliched, but basically, I think first and foremost, you should of course be building something that you're really passionate about, and even if it doesn't get loads of attention and stuff, in a way, this is obviously something you want to strive for. But if you're building something that you really love and it's a passion project, then this is kind of the first thing to make sure you're doing. And if you end up building something that you think people need, but you don't care about, then that's also, I would say, not going to succeed. I feel really lucky that I really feel like it never really feels like work. I'm just kind of building this thing that I'm obsessed about, and kind of can't wait to try it myself, and just really excited about it. And if you don't feel like that about what you're doing, then I would say you should try and make sure you can get that feeling if you can. That's a luxury. Not everybody can obviously find that necessarily, but that's a really important piece of the puzzle as well, because otherwise it's going to be quite tedious, because there's a lot of work, I suppose. So you got to love what you're doing as well. But yeah.
Excellent. I love it. We're all striving for that. This is great. This is a great way to end this. Thank you so much. This was really, really good.
Thank you.
That's amazing. And I can I guess stop recording right now. And